Hey, welcome to the Jane and Jeremy Show. And on this edition, we wanted to take a little break from all the positive things in our industry and talk about maybe some of the mistakes that we've seen that led to less than positive outcomes. And some of these are maybe not going to be highlighted, certainly by the franchise development team as they're in sales mode. So we're going to focus on three, and we're going to start with biting off more than you can chew. And here with his real life personal story that worked out, but is a cautionary tale a little bit, is Jeremy, my partner, who is a multi-unit franchise owner, and I'll let him share his experience with you. Jeremy?
Hey Jane, thanks. Yeah, I guess, biting off more than you can chew. My background was I came out of corporate. I'd been running a team of over 100 people, had joint responsibility for a $2 billion business. And so as I was looking at franchises, I ended up signing on at the same time with two brands, thinking how difficult can it be to open two businesses? They're small, et cetera. And I think, with hindsight, we kind of compounded that as well, because first locations, we were able to find a space that was large enough for the two side by side. And they were kind of complementary businesses. And so, not only did we sign on for two different businesses, but then we were building out and getting ready to open first locations of those two businesses. And so we, hiring teams, dealing with all the marketing, kind of going through the training, putting teams through training, and then literally we had grand openings literally within 5 days of each other. Well, and finishing up construction and yada yada. So I think with hindsight, my advice to anybody is find that one franchise that works best for you. Make a decision on that, and then kind of get that going. If it's multiple locations, great. And then, think about as you get, beyond perhaps location, 2, maybe 3, what's the growth plan beyond that? And think about that at that point, as opposed to, when you're starting.
Yeah, that honeymoon period when franchisees fall in love with the brand, and there's a lot of development teams and brokers who will encourage all of that adrenaline and drive, and they'll get going, and there's brands that sell 10 packs. I've seen people sign 20 pack agreements. And there's virtually, in my experience, no one, well, let me put it another way. 90% of the people who sign those agreements will never open 10 locations. The franchisor knows it, the broker knows it, the payday is bigger. So there's very few reasons that warrant a 10 pack unless you are an experienced business owner with a management team in place who's going to execute, and how to do this. There's financial incentives often to sign a 3-pack. That might make sense because sometimes you can save substantial dollars and you negotiate as long of a development schedule as you can. But whenever I see somebody signing a 10-pack or a 20-pack, I just roll my eyes because they're going to lose their money. They're going to open one, or maybe they're going to open two. And it's just, it rarely makes sense unless it's a super sophisticated business owner already. So, okay, so that's mistake number one, biting off more than you can chew. Let's talk about the very biggest one in any small business, and that's going in undercapitalized. People don't realize you need the financial runway to not only get the business open, which is going to take longer and cost more than you believe it will, almost invariably, and pay your bills personally until that business starts cash flowing, and pay all the business expenses, including the debt service, until that business starts cash flowing. And it's the number one reason for failure. People just run out of runway. And it's a shame. And a lot of people had that happen, unfortunately, during COVID, which was extraordinary circumstances. Hopefully will never happen again in our lifetime, but it was really a cautionary tale. Jeremy, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
Look, I think you're right, Jane. I think where it's a little bit different if you're looking at kind of a service type business, no bricks and mortar, perhaps. I think as you talk to owners as you're doing validation in those types of businesses, you'll hear a much tighter range in terms of how quickly they can be open for business. Obviously, the period to break even is going to vary. But I think if you're looking at a bricks and mortar business, I've seen literally within my my experience in terms of helping people find locations and develop. Somebody did it within 3 months, and she was open probably 5 months after signing the franchise agreement. Somebody took a year and a half, and she's a great operator. It wasn't the individual; it was just trying to find that right location. And so if if your whole kind of runway is a certain period when you need to be kind of replacing income, that can be a really big factor.
Yeah, thank you. So true. And then the final one we wanted to touch on is just cutting corners by, saving $2,000 because you don't want to hire a franchise attorney. And so that can manifest in two ways. One is you hire your buddy who's not a franchise attorney who charges you $500. And the thing is, our legal language is different. What's universally standard is very different in the franchising world. So you really, really need an attorney who only does or mostly does franchise agreements. And every franchisor is going to say, or most of them, you're welcome to get an attorney review, but we're not going to make any modifications. Well, guess what? Two things. One is they do make minor modifications. It's not going to be on anything significant like fees, but it may be on territory. That's the most common one. But secondly, is just to gain an understanding of what you're signing. So I know Jeremy has some thoughts on this too. I'll let you talk about.
Yeah, look, I think, Jane, that last point is really important. Look, if somebody's coming from a background of in their commercial life, if they're coming out of the corporate world, if they've negotiated documents, kind of very familiar with with legal agreements, I think that's one thing. I mean, I think I think there are examples there where kind of if you feel very comfortable with totally understanding what you're reviewing and signing, that's one thing. But the reality is most people haven't come from that background, and so I think it is really important to have somebody that's going to explain to you these are your obligations, because you are committing to various things within the franchise agreement. And I think it's really important that you understand what those are, both in terms of ongoing operation, but also if you run into some challenges and what your liabilities and obligations are in that regard.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. And we hope you'll subscribe to our Vimeo and YouTube channels and sign up for our newsletter. Signing off. For your franchise is waiting. Thanks for listening.